the Mahabharata of Krishna-Dwaipayana Vyasa. Translated into English prose from the original Sanskrit text by Pratap Chandra Roy C.I.E. This free ebook has been downloaded from holybooks.com. Vana Parva. Section 92, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Lomesa continued, "Listen now, O Yudhishthira, to what Dhananjaya hath said. Cause my brother Yudhishthira to attend to the practice of virtue which leadeth to prosperity. Endued with wealth of asceticism, thou art conversant with the highest morality, with ascetic austerities of every kind, with the eternal duties of kings blessed with prosperity, and the high and sanctifying merit that men obtain from tirthas. Persuade thou the sons of Pandu to acquire the merit attaching to tirthas. Do thou with thy whole soul persuade the king to visit the tirthas and give away kin. This is what Arjuna said unto me. Indeed he also said, let him visit all the tirthas protected by thee. Thou wilt also protect him from Rakshasas, and watch over him in inaccessible regions and rugged mountain breasts. And as the Rishi had protected Indra, and Angiras had protected the sun, so do thou, O best of regenerate ones, protect the sons of Kunti from Rakshasas. Along the way are many Rakshasas, huge as mountain cliffs. But protected by thee these will not be able to approach the sons of Kunti. Obedient to the words of Indra and at the request of Arjuna also protecting thee from dangers, I shall wander with thee. Before this, O son of the Kuru race, I have twice visited the tirthas. With thee I shall repair to them for the third time. O Yudhishthira, Manu and other royal rishis of meritorious deeds had undertaken journeys to tirthas. Indeed, a trip to them is capable of dispelling all fear, O king. They that are crooked-minded, they that have not their souls under control, they that are illiterate and perverse, do not, O Kauvya, bathe in tirthas. But thou art ever of a virtuous disposition and conversant with morality and firm in thy promises. Thou wilt surely be able to free thyself from the world. For, O son of Pandu, thou art even as King Bhagiratha, or Gaya, or Yayati, or any one, O son of Kunti, that is like them. Yudhishthira answered, I am so overwhelmed with delight, O Brahmana, that I cannot find words to answer thee. Who can be more fortunate than he who is remembered even by the Lord of the Celestials? Who can be more fortunate than he who hath been favored with thy company, who hath Dhananjaya for a brother, and who is thought of by Vasva himself? As to thy words, O illustrious one, in respect of a trip to the tirthas, my mind had already been made up at the words of Dharmya. O Brahmana, I shall start, at whatever hour thou mayst be pleased to appoint, on the proposed journey to tirthas. Even this is my firm resolve. Vasampayana continued, Lomisa then said unto Yudhishthira, who had made up his mind to start on the proposed journey, O mighty king, be thou light as regards thy retinue, for by this thou wilt be able to go more easily. Yudhishthira then said, let those mendicants and brahmanas and yogis that are incapable of bearing hunger and thirst, the fatigues of travel and toil, and the severity of winter, desist. Let those brahmanas also desist that live on sweetmeats, and they also that desire cooked viands and food that is sucked or drunk as well as meat. And let those also remain behind that are dependent on cooks. Let those citizens that have followed me from motives of loyalty, and whom I have hitherto kept on proper stipends, repair to King Dhritarashtra. He will give them their allowances in due time. If, however, that king refuses to grant them proper allowances, the king of the Panchalas will, for our satisfaction and welfare, give them these. Vasampayana continued, and thereupon oppressed with grief, the citizens and the principal Brahmanas and Yatis set out for Hastinapura. And out of affection for Yudhishthira the just, the royal son of Ambika received them properly, and gratified them with proper allowances. And the royal son of Kunti, with only a small number of Brahmanas, abode for 3 nights at Kamyak, cheered by Lomisa. Thus ends the 92nd section in the Tirthayatara Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 93, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Vasampayana said, those Brahmanas then, that had been dwelling with him in the woods, beholding the son of Kunti about to set out on the pious pilgrimage, approached him, O king, and said, Thou art about to set out, O king, on thy journey to the sacred Tirthas, along with thy brothers and accompanied by the illustrious Rishi Lomisa. O king, it behoveth thee, O son of Pandu, to take us with thee. Without thee, we shall not be able, O son of the Kuru race, to visit them at any time. Surrounded by dangers and difficult of access, they are infested by beasts of prey. Those Tirthas, O Lord of men, are inaccessible to persons in small parties. Foremost of all wielders of the bow, thy brothers are ever brave. Protected by your heroic selves, we also would proceed to them. Permit us to acquire, O Lord of earth, through thy grace the blessed fruit of Tirthas. Protected by thy energy, let us, O king, be cleansed of all our sins by visiting those Tirthas and purified by baths therein. Bathing in those Tirthas, thou also, O Bharata, wilt acquire without doubt the regions difficult of acquisition that Kartavya and Ashtaka, the royal sage Lomapta and the imperial and heroic Bharata only had earned. In thy company, O king, we desire to behold Prabhasa and other Tirthas, Mahendra and other hills, Ganga and other rivers, and Plaksha and other gigantic trees. If, O Lord of men, thou hast any regard for the Brahmanas, do thou our bidding. Thou wilt surely have prosperity from this. O thou of mighty arms, the Tirthas are infested by Rakshasas that ever obstruct ascetic penances. It behoveth thee to protect us from them. Protected by Lomisa and taking us with thee, go thou to all the Tirthas spoken of by Goyamya and the intelligent Narada, as also all those that have been spoken of by the celestial Rishi Lomisa, endued with great ascetic wealth, and be thou by this cleansed of all thy sins. Thus addressed respectfully by them, the king that bull amongst the sons of Pandu surrounded by his heroic brothers headed by Bhima, with tears of joy in his eyes, said unto all those ascetics, Let it be so. With the permission then of Lomisa, as also of his priest Goyamya, that foremost of Pandu's sons with soul under complete control, resolved, along with his brothers and Drupada's daughter of faultless features, to set out. Just at this time, the blessed Vyasa, as also Parvata and Narada, all endued with high intelligence, came to Kamyak for seeing the son of Pandu. Beholding them, King Yudhishthira worshipped them with due rites. And worshipped by the monarch thus, those blessed ones, addressing Yudhishthira, said, O Yudhishthira, O Bhima, and ye twins, banish all evil thoughts from your minds. Purify your hearts and then set out for the Tirthas. The Brahmanas have said that the observance of regulations in respect of the body are called earthly woes, while efforts to purify the heart, so that it may be free from evil thoughts, are called spiritual woes. O king, the mind that is free from all evil thoughts is highly pure. Purifying yourselves, therefore, harboring only friendly feelings for all, behold ye the tirthas. Observing earthly woes in respect of your bodies and purifying your minds by spiritual woes, obtain ye the fruits as recited, of pilgrimages. Saying, so be it, the Pandavas with Krishna, caused those celestial and human rishis to perform the usual propitiatory ceremonies. And those heroes, having worshipped the feet of Lomesa and Dwaipayana and Narada and the celestial rishi Parvata, O king, and accompanied by Goemya as also the ascetics that had been residing with them in the woods, set out on the day following the full moon of Agrahayana in which the constellation Pushya was ascendant, dressed in barks and hides, and with matted lock on head. They were all cased in impenetrable mail and armed with swords. And O Janamejaya, the heroic sons of Pandu with quivers and arrows and scimitars and other weapons, and accompanied by Indrasena and other attendants with 14 and 1 cars, a number of cooks and servants of other classes, set out with faces turned towards the east. Thus ends the 93rd section in the Tirthayatara Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 94, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Yudhishthira said, O best of celestial rishis, I do not think that I am without merits. Yet am I afflicted with so much sorrow that there never was a king like me. I think, however, that my enemies are destitute of good qualities and even destitute of morality. Yet why, O Lomesa, do they prosper in this world? Lomesa said, grieve not ever, O king, O son of Pritha, that sinful men should often prosper in consequence of the sins they commit. A man may be seen to prosper by his sins, obtain good therefrom and vanquish his foes. Destruction, however, overtakes him to the roots. O king, I have seen many Daityas and Danvas prosper by sin, but I have also seen destruction overtake them. O exalted one, I have seen all this in the righteous age of yore. The gods practiced virtue, while the Asuras abandoned it. The gods visited the Tirthas, while the Asuras did not visit them. And at first the sinful Asuras were possessed with pride. And pride begat vanity, and vanity begat wrath. And from wrath arose every kind of evil propensities, and from these latter sprang shamelessness. And in consequence of shamelessness, good behavior disappeared from among them. And because they had become shameless and destitute of virtuous propensities and good conduct and virtuous woes, forgiveness and prosperity and morality forsook them in no time. And prosperity then, O king, sought the gods, while adversity sought the Asuras. And when the Daityas and the Danvas, deprived of sense by pride, were possessed by adversity, Kali also sought to possess them. And, O son of Kunti, overwhelmed with pride, and destitute of rites and sacrifices, and devoid of reason and feeling, and their hearts full of vanity, destruction overtook them soon. And covered with infamy, the Daityas were soon exterminated. The gods, however, who were virtuous in their practices, going to the seas, the rivers, the lakes and the holy spots, cleansed themselves of all sins, O son of Pandu, by means of ascetic penances and sacrifices and gifts and blessings, and obtained prosperity and the consequence. And because the gods always performed sacrifices and holy deeds, abandoning every practice that was evil, and visited the Tirthas, as the consequence thereof they acquired great good fortune. Guided by this, O king, do thou also, with thy brothers, bathe in Tirthas, for then thou wilt obtain prosperity once more. Even this is the eternal road. And, O monarch, as King Nriga and Shivi and Ozinara and Bhagiratha and Vasumnas and Gaya and Puru and Pururavas, by practicing ascetic penances and visiting tirthas and touching sacred waters and beholding illustrious ascetics, obtained fame and sanctity and merit and wealth, so wilt thou also obtain prosperity that is great. And as Ikshvaku with his sons, friends and followers, as Muchukunda and Mandatri and King Maruta, as the gods through power of asceticism and the celestial rishis also, had all obtained fame, so wilt thou also obtain great celebrity. The sons of Dhritarashtra, on the other hand, enslaved by sinfulness and ignorance, will, without doubt, be soon exterminated like the Daityas. Thus ends the 94th section in the Tirthayatara Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 95, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Vasampayana said, the heroic sons of Pandu, accompanied by their followers, proceeding from place to place, at last arrived at Namisha. O king, reaching the Gomti, the Pandavas bathed in the sacred tirtha of that stream, and having performed their ablutions there, they gave away, O Bharata, both kin and wealth, and repeatedly offering oblations of water, O Bharata, to the gods, the Pitris, and the Brahmanas, in the tirthas called Kanya, Asv, and Go, and staying as directed, in Calcutta and the Vishaprastha hills, the Pandavas then, O king, reached Vahudha and performed their ablution in that stream. Proceeding next, O Lord of earth, to the sacrificial region of the gods known by the name Prayaga, they bathed in the confluence of Ganga and Yamuna and residing there practiced ascetic penances of great merit. And the Pandavas, of truthful promises, bathing in the tirtha, cleansed themselves of every sin. The sons of Pandu then, O king of the Bharata race, accompanied by those Brahmanas, proceeded to the tirtha called Vedi, sacred to the Creator and adored by the ascetics. Residing there for some time and gratifying the Brahmanas with the fruit and roots of the wilderness and clarified butter, those heroes began to practice ascetic penances of great merit. They then proceeded to Mahidara consecrated by that virtuous royal sage Gaya of unrivaled splendor. In that region is the hill called Gayasira, as well as the delightful river called Mahandi, with fine banks graced by bushes of canes. On that celestial hill of holy peaks is a sacred tirtha called Brahmasara which is much adored by ascetics. There on the banks of that lake had dwelt of yore the eternal God himself of justice, and it was thither that the illustrious Rishi Agastya had repaired to behold that deity. It is from that lake that all the rivers take their rise, and there in that tirtha, Mahadev the wielder of the Pinaka, is present for aye. Arriving at that spot, the heroic sons of Pandu practiced the vow that is known by the name of the Chaturmasya according to all the rites and ordinances of the great sacrifice called Rishiyajna. It is there that mighty tree called the eternal banyan stands. Any sacrifice performed there produces merit that is eternal. In that sacrificial platform of the gods producing eternal merit, the Pandavas began to fast with concentrated souls. And there came unto them Brahmanas by hundreds endued with wealth of asceticism. And those Brahmanas also all performed the Chaturmasya sacrifice according to the rites inculcated by the rishis. And there in that tirtha, those Brahmanas old in knowledge and ascetic merit and fully versed in the Vedas, that constituted the court of the illustrious sons of Pandu, talked in their presence upon various subjects of sacred import. And it was in that place that the learned vow observing, and sacred Shamanta, leading, besides, a life of celibacy, spake unto them, O king, of Gaya, the son of Amartaraya. And Shamanta said, Gaya, the son of Amartaraya, was one of the foremost of royal sages. Listen to me, O Bharata, as I recite his meritorious deeds. It was here, O king, that Gaya had performed many sacrifices distinguished by the enormous quantities of food that were distributed and the profuse gifts that were given away unto Brahmanas. Those sacrifices, O king, were distinguished by mountains in hundreds and thousands of cooked rice, lakes of clarified butter and rivers of curds in many hundreds, and streams of richly dressed curries in thousands. Day after day were these got ready and distributed amongst all comers, while, over and above this, Brahmanas and others, O king, received food that was clean and pure. During the conclusion also of every sacrifice, when gifts were dedicated to the Brahmanas, the chanting of the Vedas reached the heavens, and so loud, indeed, was the sound of the Vedic mantras that nothing else, O Bharata, could be heard there. Thus sacred sounds, O king, filled the earth, the points of the horizon, the sky and heaven itself. Even these were the wonders that persons noticed on those occasions. And gratified with the excellent viands and drinks that the illustrious Gaya provided, men, O bull of the Bharata race, went about singing these verses. In Gaya's great sacrifice, who is there today, amongst creatures, that still desireth to eat? There are yet 25 mountains of food there after all have been fed. What the royal sage Gaya of immense splendor hath achieved in his sacrifice was never achieved by men before, nor will be by any in future. The gods have been so surfeited by Gaya with clarified butter that they are not able to take anything that anybody else may offer. As sand grains on earth, as stars in the firmament, as drops showered by rain-charged clouds, cannot ever be counted by anybody, so can none count the gifts in Gaya's sacrifice. O son of the Kuru race, many times did King Gaya perform sacrifices of this description, here, by the side of this Brahmasara. Thus ends the 95th section in the Tirthayatara Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 96, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Vasampayana said, after this the royal son of Kunti, who was ever distinguished for his profuse gifts unto Brahmanas, proceeded to the asylum of Agastya and took up his abode in Durja. It was here that foremost of speakers, King Yudhishthira, asked Lomisa as to why Agastya had slain Vatapi there. And the king also inquired after the extent of that man-destroying Daitya's prowess, and the reason also of the illustrious Agastya's wrath being excited against that Asura. Thus questioned, Lomisa said, O son of Kuru race, there was in the city called Manimeti, in days of yore, a Daitya named Ilvala, whose younger brother was Vatapi. One day that son of Diti addressed the Brahmana endued with ascetic merit, saying, O Holy One, grant me a son equal unto Indra. The Brahmana, however, did not grant the Asura a son like Indra. And at this, the Asura was inflamed with wrath against the Brahmana. And from that day, O king, the Asura Ilvala became a destroyer of Brahmanas. And endued with power of illusion, the angry Asura transformed his brother into a ram. And Vatapi, also capable of assuming any form at will, would immediately assume the shape of a ram. And the flesh of that ram, after being properly dressed, was offered to Brahmanas as food. And after they had eaten of it, they were slain. For whomsoever Ilvala summoned with his voice, he would come back to Ilvala even if he had gone to the abode of Yam, in re-embodied form endued with life, and show himself to Ilvala. And so having transformed the Asura Vatapi into a ram and properly cooked his flesh and feeding Brahmanas therewith, he would summon Vatapi. And the mighty Asura Vatapi, that foe of Brahmanas, endued with great strength and power of illusion, hearing, O king, those sounds uttered with a loud voice by Ilvala, and ripping open the flanks of the Brahmana would come laughingly out, O Lord of earth. And it was thus, O monarch, that the wicked-hearted Daitya Ilvala, having fed Brahmanas, frequently took away their lives. Meanwhile, the illustrious Agastya beheld his deceased ancestors hanging in a pit with heads downwards. And he asked those personages thus suspended in that hole, saying, What is the matter with you? Thus questioned those utterers of Brahma replied, It is even for offspring. And they also told him, We are your ancestors. It is even for offspring that we stay suspended in this pit. If, O Agastya, thou canst beget us a good son, we may then be saved from this hell, and thou also wilt obtain thy blessed state of those having offspring. Endued with great energy and observant of truth and morality, Agastya replied, saying, Ye Pitris, I will accomplish your desire. Let this anxiety of yours be dispelled. And the illustrious Rishi then began to think of perpetuating his race. But he saw not a wife worthy of him on whom he himself could take his birth in the form of a son. The Rishi accordingly, taking those parts that were regarded as highly beautiful, from creatures possessing them, created therewith an excellent woman. And the Muni, endued with great ascetic merit, thereupon gave that girl created for himself to the king of the Vidarbhas, who was then undergoing ascetic penances for obtaining offspring. And that blessed girl of sweet face thus disposed of, then took her birth in Vidarbha's royal line, and beautiful as the effulgent lightning, her limbs began to grow day by day. And as soon as that lord of earth, the ruler of the Vidarbhas, saw her ushered into life, he joyfully communicated the intelligence, O Bharata, unto the Brahmanas. And the Brahmanas thereupon, O Lord of earth, blessed the girl, and they bestowed upon her the name Lopamudra. And possessed of great beauty, she began, O monarch, to grow quickly, like unto a lotus in the midst of water or the effulgent flame of a fire. And when the girl grew and attained to puberty, 100 virgins decked in ornaments and 100 maids waited in obedience upon her blessed self, and surrounded by those 100 maids and virgins, she shone in their midst, endued as she was with bright effulgence, like Rohini in the firmament amid an inferior multitude of stars. And possessed as she was of good behavior and excellent manners, none dared ask for her hand even when she attained to puberty, through fear of her father, the king of the Vidarbhas. And Lopamudra, devoted to truth, surpassing the Apsaras even in beauty, gratified her father and relatives by means of her conduct. And her father, beholding his daughter the princess of Vidarbha attain to puberty, began to reflect in his mind, saying, To whom should I give this daughter of mine? Thus ends the 96th section in the Tirthayatara Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 97, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Lomisa continued, when Agastya thought that girl to be competent for the duties of domesticity, he approached that lord of earth, the ruler of Vidarbhas, and addressing him, said, I solicit thee, O king, to bestow thy daughter Lopamudra on me. Thus addressed by the Muni, the king of the Vidarbhas swooned away. And though unwilling to give the Muni his daughter, he dared not refuse. And that lord of earth then, approaching his queen, said, This Rishi is endued with great energy. If angry, he may consume me with the fire of his curse. O thou of sweet face, tell me what is thy wish. Hearing these words of the king, she uttered not a word. And beholding the king along with the queen afflicted with sorrow, Lopamudra approached them in due time and said, O monarch, it behoveth thee not to grieve on my account. Bestow me on Agastya, and, O father, save thyself, by giving me away. And at these words of his daughter, O monarch, the king gave away Lopamudra unto the illustrious Agastya with due rights. And obtaining her as wife, Agastya addressed Lopamudra, saying, Cast thou away these costly robes and ornaments. And at these words of her lord, that large-eyed damsel of thighs tapering as the stem of the plantain tree cast away her handsome and costly robes of fine texture. And casting them away she dressed herself in rags and barks and deerskins, and became her husband's equal in vows and acts. And proceeding then to Gangavara, that illustrious and best of rishis began to practice the severest penances along with his helpful wife. And Lopamudra herself, well pleased, began to serve her lord from the deep respect that she bore him. And the exalted Agastya also began to manifest great love for his wife. After a considerable time, O king, the illustrious rishi one day beheld Lopamudra, blazing in ascetic splendor, come up after the bath in her season. And pleased with the girl, for her services, her purity, and self-control, as also with her grace and beauty, he summoned her for marital intercourse. The girl, however, joining her hands, bashfully but lovingly addressed the rishi, saying, The husband, without doubt, weddeth the wife for offspring. But it behoveth thee, O rishi, to show that love to me which I have for thee. And it behoveth thee, O regenerate one, to approach me on a bed like to that which I had in the palace of my father. I also desired that thou shouldst be decked in garlands of flowers and other ornaments, and that I should approach thee adorned in those celestial ornaments that I like. Otherwise, I cannot approach thee, dressed in these rags dyed in red. Nor, O regenerate rishi, it is sinful to wear ornaments on such an occasion. Hearing these words of his wife, Agastya replied, O blessed girl, O thou of slender waist, I have not wealth like what thy father hath, O Lopamudra. She answered saying, Thou who art endued with wealth of asceticism, art certainly able to bring hither within a moment, by ascetic power, everything that exists in the world of men. Agastya said, It is even so as thou hast said. That, however, would waste my ascetic merit. O bid me do that which may not loosen my ascetic merit. Lopamudra then said, O thou endued with wealth of asceticism, my season will not last long. I do not desire, however, to approach thee otherwise. Nor do I desire to diminish thy ascetic merit in any way. It behoveth thee, however, to do as I desire, without injuring thy virtue. Agastya then said, O blessed girl, if this be the resolve that thou hast settled in thy heart, I will go out in quest of wealth. Meanwhile, stay thou here as it pleaseth thee. Thus ends the 97th section in the Tirthayatara Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 98, Tirthayatara Parva continued. Lomesa continued, Agastya then, O son of the Kuru race, went to King Srutavan, who was regarded as richer than other kings, to beg for wealth. And that monarch, learning of the arrival of the pot-born rishi on the frontiers of his kingdoms, went out with his ministers and received the holy man with respect. And the king, duly offering the argya in the first instance, submissively and with joined hands inquired then after the reason of the rishi's arrival. And Agastya answered saying, O Lord of the earth, know that I have come to thee, desirous of wealth. Give me a portion according to thy ability and without doing injury to others. Lomesa continued, the king, then representing unto the rishi the equality of his expenditure and income, said, O learned one, take thou from my possessions the wealth thou pleasest. Beholding however the equality of that monarch's expenditure with income, the rishi who always saw both sides with equal eyes, thought that if he took anything under the circumstances, his act would result in injury to creatures. Taking Srutavan with him, the rishi went to Vratnasv. The latter, hearing of their arrival on his frontiers, received them duly. And Vratnasv also offered them the argyas and water to wash their feet. And the monarch, with their permission, then inquired after the reason of their coming. And Agastya said, O Lord of earth, know that we have come to thee desirous of wealth. Give us what thou canst, without doing injury to others. Lomesa continued, that monarch then represented unto them the equality of his expenditure and income, and said, knowing this, take ye what ye desire. The rishi, however, who saw both sides with equal eyes, beholding the equality of that monarch's income with expenditure, thought that if he took anything under the circumstances, his act would result in injury to all creatures. Agastya and Srutavan, with King Vardhanav then went to Purokutsa's son, Trasadsu, of enormous wealth. The high-souled Trasadsu, learning of their arrival on the confines of his kingdom went out, O king, and received them well. And that best of monarchs in Ikshavku's line, having worshipped all of them duly, inquired after the reason of their arrival. And Agastya answered, O Lord of earth, know that we have all come to thee, desirous of wealth. Give us what you can, without injuring others. Lomesa continued, that monarch then, represented unto them the equality of his income with expenditure, and said, knowing this, take ye what ye desire. Beholding however, the equality of that monarch's expenditure with income, the rishi who saw both sides with equal eyes, thought that if he took anything under the circumstances his act would result in injury to all creatures. Then, O monarch, all those kings looking at one another, together spoke unto the rishis saying, O Brahmana, there is a Danva of the name Ilvala who of all persons on earth, is possessed of enormous wealth. Let us all approach him today and beg wealth of him. Lomesa continued, this suggestion, O king, of begging wealth of Ilvala appeared to them to be proper. And, O monarch, all of them went together to Ilvala after this. Thus ends the 98th section in the Tirthayatara Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 99, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Lomesa said, when Ilvala learned that those kings along with the great rishi had arrived on the confines of his domain, he went out with his ministers and worshipped them duly. And that prince of Asuras received them hospitably, entertaining them, O son of the Kuru race, with well-dressed meats supplied by his brother Vatapi transformed into a ram. Then all those royal sages, beholding the mighty Asura Vatapi, who had been transformed into a ram thus cooked for them, became sad and cheerless and were nearly deprived of themselves. But that best of rishis Agastya addressing those royal sages, said, yield ye not to grief, I will eat up the great Asura. And the mighty rishi then sat himself down on an excellent seat, and the prince of Asuras, Ilvala, began to distribute the food smilingly. And Agastya ate up the whole of the meat supplied by Vatapi, transformed into a ram. And after the dinner was over, Ilvala began to summon his brother. But thereupon a quantity of air alone came out of the illustrious rishi's stomach, with a sound that was as loud, O child, as the roar of the clouds. And Ilvala repeatedly said, "Come out, O Vatapi." Then that best of Munis, Agastya, bursting out in laughter, said, "How can he come out? I have already digested that great Asura." And beholding his brother already digested, Ilvala became sad and cheerless, and joining his hands, along with his ministers, addressing the Rishi and his companions, said, "What for have ye come hither, and what can I do for you?" And Agastya smilingly answered Ilvala, saying, "We know thee, O Asura, to be possessed of great power and also enormous wealth. These kings are not very wealthy, while my need also of wealth is great. Give us what thou canst, without injuring others." Thus addressed, Ilvala saluted the Rishi and said, "If thou canst say what it is that I mean to give, then will I give you wealth." Hearing this, Agastya said, "O great Asura, thou hast even purposed to give unto each of these kings 10,000 kin and as many gold coins. And unto me thou hast purposed to give twice as much, as also a car of gold and a couple of horses fleet as thought. If thou enquirest now, thou wilt soon learn that your car is made of gold." Thereupon, O son of Kunti, Ilvala made enquiries and learned that the car he had intended to give away was really a golden one. And the Daitya then with a sad heart, gave away much wealth and that car, unto which were yoked 2 steeds called Virava and Surva. And those steeds, O Bharata, took those kings and Agastya and all that wealth to the asylum of Agastya within the twinkling of an eye. And those royal sages then obtaining Agastya's permission, went away to their respective cities. And Agastya also, with that wealth, did all that his wife, Lopamudra had desired. And Lopamudra then said, "O illustrious one, thou hast now accomplished all my wishes. Beget thou a child on me that shall be possessed of great energy." And Agastya replied unto her, saying, "O blessed and beauteous one, I have been much gratified with thy conduct. Listen thou unto me as regards the proposal I make in respect of thy offspring. Wouldst thou have 1,000 sons, or a century of sons each equal to 10, or 10 sons equal each to 100, or only one son who may vanquish 1,000? Lopamudra answered, "Let me have one son equal unto 1,000, O thou endued with wealth of asceticism. One good and learned son is preferable to many evil ones." Lomesa continued, saying, "So be it." That pious Muni thereupon knew his devout wife of equal behavior, and after she had conceived, he retired into the forest. And after the Muni had gone away, the fetus began to grow for 7 years. And after the 7th year had expired, there came out of the womb the highly learned Dritsu, blazing, O Bharata, in his own splendor. And the great Brahmana and illustrious ascetic, endued with mighty energy, took his birth as the Rishi's son, coming out of the womb, as if repeating the Vedas with the Upanishads and the Angas. Endued with great energy while yet a child, he used to carry loads of sacrificial fuel into the asylum of his father, and was thence called Shmav, carrier of sacrificial wood. And the Muni, beholding his son possessed of such virtues, became highly glad. And it was thus, O Bharata, that Agastya begat an excellent son, in consequence of which his ancestors, O king, obtained the regions they desired. And it is from that time that this spot hath become known on the earth as the asylum of Agastya. Indeed, O king, this is the asylum graced with numerous beauties, of that Agastya who had slain Vatapi of Prahrada's race. The sacred Bhagirathi, adored by gods and Gandharvas, gently runneth by, like a breeze shaken pennon in the welkin. Yonder also she floweth over craggy crests, descending lower and lower, and looketh like an affrighted she-snake lying along the hilly slopes. Issuing out of the matted locks of Mahadev, she passeth along, flooding the southern country and benefiting it like a mother, and ultimately mingleth with the ocean as if she were his favorite bride. Bathe ye as ye like in this sacred river, ye son of Pandu. And behold there, O Yudhishthira, the Tirtha of Bhrigu that is celebrated over the three worlds and adored, O king, by great rishis. Bathing here, Rama of Bhrigu's race regained his might, which had been taken away from him by the Siratha's son. Bathing here, O son of Pandu, with thy brothers and Krishna, thou wilt certainly regain that energy of thine that hath been taken away by Duryodhan, even as Rama regained his that had been taken away by the Siratha's son in hostile encounter. Vasampayana continued, at these words of Lomisa, Yudhishthira bathed there with his brothers and Krishna, and offered oblations of water, O Bharata, to the gods and the Pitris. And, O bull among men, after Yudhishthira had bathed in that tirtha, his body blazed forth in brighter effulgence, and he became invisible in respect of all foes. The son of Pandu then, O king, asked Lomesa, saying, O illustrious one, why had Rama's energy and might been taken away? And how also did he regain it? O exalted one, I ask thee, tell me everything. Lomesa said, listen, O king, to the history of Rama, the son of Dasratha, and Rama of Bhrigu's line gifted with intelligence. For the destruction of Ravana, O king, Vishnu, in his own body, took his birth as the son of illustrious Dasratha. We saw in Ayodhya that son of Dasratha after he had been born. It was then that Rama of Bhrigu's line, the son of Richika by Renuka, hearing of Rama the son of Dasratha of spotless deeds, went to Ayodhya, impelled by curiosity, and taking with him that celestial bow so fatal to the Kshatriyas, for ascertaining the prowess of Dasratha's son. And Dasratha, hearing that Rama of Bhrigu's race had arrived on the confines of his domains, set his own son Rama to receive the hero with respect. And beholding Dasratha's son approach and stand before him with ready weapons, Rama of Bhrigu's line smilingly addressed him, O son of Kunti, saying, O king, O exalted one, string, if thou canst, with all thy might, this bow which in my hands was made the instrument of destroying the Kshatriya race. Thus addressed, Dasratha's son answered, O illustrious one, it behoveth thee not to insult me thus. Nor am I, amongst the regenerate classes, deficient in the virtues of the Kshatriya order. The descendants of Ikshvaku in special never boast of the prowess of their arms. Then unto the Siratha's son who said so, Rama of Bhrigu's line replied, a truce to all crafty speech, O king. Take this bow. At this, Rama the son of the Siratha, took in anger from the hands of Rama of Bhrigu's line that celestial bow that had dealt death to the foremost of Kshatriyas. And, O Bharata, the mighty hero smilingly strung that bow without the least exertion, and with its twang loud as the thunder rattle, affrighted all creatures. And Rama, the son of Dasratha, then, addressing Rama of Bhrigu's race, said, Here, I have strung this bow. What else, O Brahmana, shall I do for thee? Then Rama, the son of Jamdagni, gave unto the illustrious son of Dasiratha a celestial arrow and said, placing this on the bowstring, draw to thy ear, O hero. Lomisa continued. Hearing this, Dasiratha's son blazed up in wrath and said, I have heard what thou hast said, and even pardoned thee. O son of Bhrigu's race, thou art full of vanity. Through the grandsire's grace thou hast obtained energy that is superior to that of the Kshatriyas, and it is for this that thou insultest me. Behold me now in my native form, I give thee sight. Then Rama of Bhrigu's race beheld in the body of the Siratha's son the Adityas with the Vasis, the Rudras, the Sadhyas with the Manvyutas, the Pitris, Hutasna, the stellar constellations and the planets, the Gandharvas, the Rakshasas, the Yakshas, the rivers, the Tirthas, those eternal rishis identified with Brahma and called the Valkilyas, the celestial rishis, the seas and mountains, the Vedas with the Upanishads and Vashats and the sacrifices, the summons in their living form, the science of weapons, O Bharata, and the clouds with rain and lightning, O Yudhishthira. And the illustrious Vishnu then shot that shaft. And at this the earth was filled with sounds of thunder, and burning meteors, O Bharata, began to flash through the welkin, and showers of dust and rain fell upon the surface of the earth. And whirlwinds and frightful sounds convulsed everything, and the earth herself began to quake, and shot by the hand of Rama, that shaft, confounding by its energy the other Rama, came back blazing into Rama's hands. And Bhargava, who had thus been deprived of his senses, regaining consciousness and life, bore unto Rama that manifestation of Vishnu's power. And commanded by Vishnu, he proceeded to the mountains of Mahendra. And thenceforth that great ascetic began to dwell there, in terror and shame. And after the expiration of a year, the Pitris, beholding Rama dwelling there deprived of energy, his pride quelled, and himself sunk in affliction, said unto him, O son, having approached Vishnu, thy behavior towards him was not proper. He deserveth for I worship and respect in the three worlds. Go, O son, to that sacred river which goeth by name of Vadusra. Bathing in all the tirthas of that stream, thou wilt regain thy energy. There in that river is the tirthas called Diptoda, where thy grandsire Bhrigu, or Rama, in the celestial age had practiced ascetic penances of great merit. Thus addressed by them, Rama, O son of Kunti, did what the Pitris bade him, and obtained back at this Tirtha, O son of Pandu, the energy he had lost. Even this, O child, was what befell Rama of spotless deeds in days of yore, after he had, O king, met Vishnu in the form of the Siratha's son. Thus ends the 99th section in the Tirthayatara Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 100, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Yudhishthira said, O best of regenerate ones, I desire again to hear of the achievements in detail of Agastya, that illustrious rishi, endued with great intelligence. Lomesa said, Listen, now, O king, to the excellent and wonderful and extraordinary history of Agastya, as also, O monarch, about the prowess of that rishi of immeasurable energy. There were, in the Krita age, certain tribes of fierce Danvas that were invincible in battle, and they were known by the name of Kalakeyas, and were endued with terrible prowess, placing themselves under Vritra and arming themselves with diverse weapons. They pursued the celestials with Indra at their head in all directions. The gods then all resolved upon the destruction of Vritra, and went with Indra at their head to Brahma. And beholding them standing before him with joined hands, Parmshti addressed them all and said, Everything is known to me, ye gods, about what ye seek. I shall indicate now the means by which ye may slay Vritra. There is a high souled and great rishi known by the name of the Dhicha. Go ye all together unto him and solicit of him a boon. With well-pleased heart, that rishi of virtuous soul will even grant you the boon. desirous as ye are of victory, go ye all together unto him and tell him, for the good of the three worlds, give us thy bones, renouncing his body, he will give you his bones. With these bones of his, make ye a fierce and powerful weapon to be called Vajra, endued with 6 sides and terrible roar and capable of destroying even the most powerful enemies. With that weapon will he offer 100 sacrifices slay Vritra. I have now told you all. See that all this is done speedily. Thus addressed by him, the gods with the grandsire's leave, came away, and with Narayana at their head proceeded to the asylum of the Dhicha. That asylum was on the other bank of the river Saraswati and covered with divers trees and creepers. And it resounded with the hum of bees as if they were reciting summons. And it also echoed with the melodious notes of the male kokila and the chakora. And buffaloes and boars and deer and chamaras wandered there at pleasure freed from the fear of tigers. And elephants with the juice trickling down from rent temples, plunging in the stream, sported with the she-elephants and made the entire region resound with their roars. And the place also echoed with the loud roars of lions and tigers, while at intervals might be seen those grisly monarchs of the forest lying stretched in caves and glens and beautifying them with their presence. And such was the asylum, like unto heaven itself, of the Dhicha, that the gods entered. And there they beheld the Dhicha looking like the sun himself in splendor and blazing in grace of person like the grandsire himself. And the celestials saluted the feet of the Rishi and bowed unto him and begged of him the boon that the grandsire had bade them do. Then the Dhicha, well pleased, addressing those foremost of celestials, said, Ye celestials, I will do what is for your benefit. I will even renounce this body of mine myself. And that foremost of men with soul under control, having said this, suddenly renounced his life. The gods then took the bones of the deceased Rishi as directed. And the celestials, glad at heart, went to Tavoshtari the celestial artificer and spake to him of the means of victory. And Tavoshtari, hearing those words of theirs, became filled with joy, and constructed, but of those bones, with great attention and care the fierce weapons called Vajra. And having manufactured it, he joyfully addressed Indra, saying, With this foremost of weapons, O exalted one, reduce that fierce foe of the gods to ashes. And having slain the foe, rule thou happily the entire domain of heaven, O chief of the celestials, with those that follow thee. And thus addressed by Tavoshtari, Purandara took the Vajra from his hand, joyfully and with proper respect. Thus ends the 100th section in the Tirtha Parva of the Vana Parva. Section 101, Tirthayatra Parva continued. Lomisa said, armed with the Vajra then, and supported by celestials endued with great might, Indra then approached Vritra, who was then occupying the entire earth and the heaven. And he was guarded on all sides by huge-bodied Kalakeyas with upraised weapons resembling gigantic mountains with towering peaks. And the encounter that took place between the gods and the Danvas lasted for a short while and was, O chief of the Bharatas, terrific in the extreme, appalling as it did the three worlds. And loud was the clash of swords and scimitars upraised and warded off by heroic hands in course of those fierce encounters. And heads, severed from trunks, began to roll from the firmament to the earth like fruits of the palmyra palm falling upon the ground, loosened from their stalks. And the Kalakeyas armed with iron-mounted bludgeons and cased in golden mail ran against the gods, like moving mountains on conflagration. And the gods, unable to stand the shock of that impetuous and proudly advancing host, broke and fled from fear. Purandara of 1,000 eyes, beholding the gods flying in fear and Vritra growing in boldness, became deeply dejected. And the foremost of gods Purandara, himself, agitated with the fear of the Kalakeyas, without losing a moment, sought the exalted Narayana's refuge. And the eternal Vishnu, beholding Indra so depressed, enhanced his might by imparting unto him a portion of his own energy. And when the celestials beheld that Sakra was thus protected by Vishnu, each of them imparted unto him his own energy. And the spotless Brahmarshis also imparted their energies unto the chief of the celestials. And favored thus by Vishnu and all the gods and by the high blessed rishis also, Sakra became mightier than before. And when Vritra learned that the chief of the celestials had been filled with might of others, he sent forth some terrific roars. And at these roars of his, the earth, the directions, the firmament, heaven, and the mountains all began to tremble. And the chief of the celestials, deeply agitated on hearing that fierce and loud roar, was filled with fear, and desiring to slay the Asura soon, hurled, O king, the mighty Vajra, and struck with Indra's Vajra the great Asura decked in gold and garlands fell headlong, like the great mountain Mandara hurled of yore from Vishnu's hands, and although the prince of Daityas was slain, yet Sakra in panic ran from the field, desiring to take shelter in a lake, thinking that the Vajra itself had not been hurled from his hands and regarding that Vritra himself was still alive. The celestials, however, and the great rishis became filled with joy, and all of them began to cheerfully chant the praise of Indra. And mustering together, the celestials began to slay the Danvas, who were dejected at the death of their leader. And struck with panic at sight of the assembled celestial host, the afflicted Danvas fled to the depths of the sea. And having entered the fathomless deep, teeming with fishes and crocodiles, the Danvas assembled together and began to proudly conspire for the destruction of the three worlds. And some amongst them that were wise in inferences suggested courses of action, each according to his judgment. In course of time, however, the dreadful resolution arrived at those conspiring sons of Diti, was that they should, first of all, compass the destruction of all persons possessed of knowledge and ascetic virtue. The worlds are all supported by asceticism. Therefore, they said, lose no time for the destruction of asceticism. Compass ye without delay the destruction of those on earth that are possessed of ascetic virtues, that are conversant with duties and the ways of morality, and that have a knowledge of Brahma, for when these are destroyed, the universe itself will be destroyed. And all the Danvas, having arrived at this resolution for the destruction of the universe, became highly glad. And thenceforth they made the ocean, that abode of Varuna with billows high as hills, their fort, from which to make their sallies. Thus ends the 101st section in the Tirthaitara Parva of the Vana Parva. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please like and subscribe to be notified of when new audiobooks are uploaded. Thank you for listening and learning. Shanti.